The debate stage was set, and tensions buzzed in the air like static before a storm. The crowd was eager, not just for policy discussion, but for spectacle. On one side stood Jasmine Crockett, known for her sharp wit, quick comebacks, and unmatched gruff of legal nuance. On the other stood Barron Trump, now stepping more into the public spotlight and eager to prove himself intellectually. This wasn't just a debate, it was being sold as a generational clash of minds. With the timer set, both were given 3 minutes to present their ideas on civic responsibility in modern America. Barron, tall and collected, adjusted his microphone and began with a rehearsed monologue. He spoke in broad strokes, quoting a few philosophers and tossed in mentions of constitutional principles. But as he spoke, his gaze flickered nervously toward Crockett, whose calm, almost amused expression betrayed no worry, only anticipation. She listened, letting him finish, knowing full well what was about to happen. Barron wrapped up his thoughts with a quote he attributed to Thomas Jefferson, though those well-versed in history noted it was actually from a contemporary columnist. The audience politely applauded, though murmurs began to ripple about the misquote. Crockett stepped up, her tone measured, but confident. She began not with her own point, but by politely correcting Barron's attribution, citing the real source and even the article date. It wasn't about shaming him, it was about accuracy. That subtle move instantly shifted the mood in the room. She then transitioned into her point with fluid precision, drawing a straight line between civic responsibility and community equity. As she spoke, she quoted Supreme Court rulings, referenced grassroots movements, and used real data to back it. Every claim, in under a minute, she had outmaneuvered Barron's entire framework without ever raising her voice. What stunned the audience wasn't just her facts, it was the elegance with which she layered logic over ideology. Barron tried to interject, pointing out that young voices like his deserved equal weight in national conversations. Crockett turned, nodded, and replied, "Absolutely. But with that voice comes responsibility, not just to speak, but to understand." She followed that with a breakdown of civic education gaps in America, noting how critical thinking is too often replaced with online echo chambers. She asked Barron directly, "Can you define substantive due process?" Barron paused, stammered, and after a beat said something vague about fairness. Crockett didn't smirk or laugh. She calmly gave the correct legal interpretation, tying it back to recent court decisions and what it means for everyday Americans. In that moment, the crowd realized this wasn't a clash of equals. It wasn't just an IQ battle, it was experience, study, and discipline against surface-level preparation. Barron was floundering, not because he wasn't smart, but because he wasn't ready. Crockett wasn't just answering questions, she was building a narrative in a bid to recover. Barron brought up economic disparities, stating that free markets correct social imbalance. Crockett raised an eyebrow and asked if he could cite a study to support that claim. He fumbled through an anecdote about business success in America, referencing vague notions of entrepreneurship. Crockett waited, then gently offered 3 peer-reviewed studies from different economic journals that contradicted his argument. She cited income inequality statistics, named authors, and noted methodologies. Her precision was clinical but never condescending. She even invited the audience to verify everything she said. That level of confidence, academic, measured, unimpressed, by flash put her miles ahead in perception. The moderator tried to redirect the conversation, but the momentum was firmly in her favor. Every time Barron spoke, it seemed more like a rehearsal. Every time Crockett responded, it felt like a masterclass. And she did it all in real time, without notes, drawing on memory and lived experience, with less than a minute left in the timed exchange. Barron made one final attempt to regain ground by invoking patriotism, suggesting that questioning American systems too much leads to division. Crockett let the silence stretch before replying. "True patriotism," she said, "isn't blind loyalty. It's the courage to improve what's broken." She quoted Frederick Douglass, reminding the room that critique rooted in love is the most loyal form of citizenship. The audience erupted in applause, louder than anything before. Barron's face reddened slightly. He tried to nod, but the contrast was glaring. He had come prepared to speak, but Crockett had come ready to teach. It wasn't even that she beat him in the debate. It was that she dismantled the very premise of his argument and replaced it with layered nuance and insight. Barron wasn't humiliated, he was overwhelmed. Not by insults, but by the sheer weight of her intellect. After the segment ended, the moderator thanked both participants. Barron quickly exited the stage, avoiding questions from the press. Cameras captured the moment his shoulders hunched, a forced smile on his face. Meanwhile, Crockett stayed behind, fielding questions with grace. One journalist asked if she had anticipated Barron's strategy. She smiled slightly and said, "I didn't prepare for Barron. I prepared for the conversation America needs to hear." That single line went viral within minutes. Political commentators praised her poise. And even typically conservative pundits admitted that her performance was intellectually devastating but respectful. Clips of her dismantling Barron's points circulated widely on social media. Hashtags like CrockettTQ and 3-minute collapse began trending. The whole encounter became symbolic, not just of a generational divide, but of the difference between preparation and performance, between surface confidence and substance. In the following days, the fallout continued. Barron's camp issued a brief statement applauding civil discourse and thanking Crockett for the opportunity, but the damage had been done. Memes flooded the internet, most respectful but undeniably critical. One particularly viral post simply read, "When you bring a quote to a law book fight." Meanwhile, Crockett continued her public engagements, speaking not about the moment itself, but about education reform and civic engagement. Her refusal to gloat made her appear even stronger. Analysts noted that Crockett had demonstrated more than just intelligence. Sue had shown leadership. She didn't need to tear Barron down. She simply let her intellect rise above the noise. The debate, which was initially planned as a publicity stunt, had turned into a turning point. Not just for her career, but for how public debates are perceived. Even critics who didn't align politically with Crockett admitted she had handled the situation with rare dignity. Editorials praised her as the future of discourse and a rising voice of reason. Universities invited her to speak. High school debate clubs studied the exchange. All of it happened in 3 minutes. That's all it took for Crockett to shift the narrative, not just about Barron, but about what real intellect looks like. It wasn't just fast talk or impressive words. It was composure under pressure, intellectual honesty, and clarity of purpose. Barron, though smart and articulate, had underestimated what it takes to stand on stage with someone who doesn't just know the facts but knows how to teach them. Crockett had turned the debate into a teachable moment for the entire nation. And she didn't do it by dominating, she did it by elevating. In a podcast episode recorded days later, Crockett addressed the event for the first time in detail. "I never saw it as a competition," she said. "It was an opportunity to show that preparation matters, that learning never stops, and that humility is part of intelligence too." That line hit hard for many young viewers. It wasn't about making Barron look foolish shit, was about showing what excellence looks like in real time. Political figures from both sides reached out privately, expressing admiration for how she handled the unexpected spotlight. Crockett, however, remained grounded. "The real work is outside the studio," she added. That was 3 minutes. "But our communities need us 24/7." The humility struck a chord. Unlike so many who see debates as battles, she saw it as service. That made all the difference. And it showed. In the end, the moment was remembered not as a humiliation, but a revelation. Jasmine Crockett had emerged not just as a political figure, but as an intellectual force. And Barron, though young and ambitious, learned a lesson about the depth required for public dialogue. It wasn't personal. It wasn't mean. It was clarity meeting confusion and refusing to shrink. The nation watched a 3-minute exchange, and from it drew weeks of lessons. Crockett didn't just win. She inspired. She reminded audiences that education is power, and that when wielded wisely, it doesn't need to shout, it simply shines. The stage was cleared, but the impression remained. Jasmine Crockett, with grace and intellect, had reshaped the conversation. And Barron, though momentarily stunned, would hopefully grow from it. In the end, truth is never about who talks louder. It's about who speaks smarter.